Hey, it's Jay. Guess who's still on their Columbo bullshit? I mentioned Poker Face before, about how Poker Face is the modern Columbo, because Rian Johnson basically admitted he is making his own Columbo. Well, I was wrong. Poker Face is a fun experiment, but it's too Hollywood. A lot of flash and cinematography that makes the show look great, very iconic. But Columbo is not prestige television. Columbo is network TV, and importantly, it's supposed to be funny. I would not say every Columbo movie is hilarious, but Columbo is definitely more goofy than suspenseful, and Poker Face doesn't quite hit humor well. Charlie Cale is a strong character, beautifully acted, but she's not quite a character the way Columbo is. Her method is about her being actually hapless, but driven by justice because of her weird superpower, and she is frequently put in actual danger, which is stressful. She's not a detective, she's a fugitive, and it just feels too much like a different thing. But if we want to talk about really hitting the feel of Columbo, there's a new name in town. Elsbeth is the best character on Good Wife. She is an autistic lawyer who has the uncanny ability to make legal nuisances disappear. She's a lawyer's lawyer, someone who gets called in when people are in legal trouble that they don't really understand. Her methods are unpredictable and she can be a bit off-putting to talk to, often getting distracted or pausing to think before asking an unrelated question. But she knows her way out on the law, and finds things others don't. If you're in trouble, you call Elsbeth. She is clearly the creator's favorite, as her character continues to get more and more appearances in Good Wife, with the reverence about her growing every time, so much so that Diane literally squeals with joy that she's there in her last appearance. She's just so friendly, and she loves your blouse. You don't really need to know all about this character to enjoy the new shows he's in, but I like to be thorough, and the Good Wife fandom page is sparsely populated, so hang in there for a bit as I give you the full history of every appearance of Elsbeth Tascioni in Good Wife. Because it would become impossible to tell you who literally everyone is, keep an eye on the context box for, well, context. Here we go. We first see Elsbeth walk into the Florrick apartment on a particularly dramatic Tuesday night. Peter is home, under house arrest pending trial for the scandal that kicked off the show, and Alicia learns something that makes her want to leave her husband after all, actually. Peter storms out after her, violating his house arrest and emotionally blackmailing her to come back inside. Meanwhile, the kids are doing everything they can to stall, and the son gets the idea to just break the equipment so they can claim it was an accident. The cops aren't gullible and keep pushing back against their lies. I'm really not sure whose side I should be on here, because on the one hand, ACAB, especially in Good Wife, they are all to a man complete assholes in this show, but on the other, Peter Florrick can also fuck himself. This man belongs in jail because he's a smug horn dog who doesn't deserve power. But Elsbeth is on Peter's side, so I guess we have to side with Peter. Nobody is really sure why Elsbeth is here until it's revealed she's Daniel Golden's partner. Who's that? Peter's lawyer. He's pretty much gone after this, but he's played by Olivia Pope's dad on Scandal. This guy is a professional scenery chewer. It's fun to watch this man scream. Anyway, she's staring at the crime scene. Damaging city property is technically a crime, and she seems to understand what the story is immediately and redirects the cops, pointing out procedural mistakes they made and basically bullying them to take off. It's an interesting first appearance, but it doesn't really show off much about her. It's more like a trial balloon for her next appearance 2 episodes later when she has something to do. Golden has gone to the White House, so Elsbeth is tagged to deal with the problem with Peter's acquittal. A little toady who might have had dirt on Peter is feared dead, and the state thinks they can use his hearsay testimony because Illinois has a new law that allows it if the witness was murdered. So Elsbeth has to prove that didn't happen to get the motion dismissed. It's a bit of a mess, as she's a bit of a character, going so far as to laugh in the judge's face, which doesn't ingratiate her well with Peter's retinue, but she shows her talent with the law when she does some digging and finds out that the witness they are talking about is still alive. He faked his death and fled to Mexico. So the case is dismissed, and I assume that guy goes to jail? We never circle back to him, but it gives Elsbeth a pretty sterling reputation. Elsbeth isn't in season 2, so I don't care what happens. This is the season where Peter decides that, hey, the stink of corruption is off me because I was acquitted. I'm just gonna run for the same office I resigned from. Chicago, am I right? Meanwhile, Michael Lilly is trying to take over the firm, and there's another investigator, Blake, who is just a real asshole who messes with Kalinda for no reason. So she doms him, and that works. Whatever, Kalinda can do whatever she wants. Anyway, no Elsbeth this season. Alicia is working on a case, and because of terrorism reasons, she's been put in a catch-22 where she doesn't have a way to maintain attorney-client privilege without going to jail. She's in a spot and needs counsel from outside the firm, so she goes to Elsbeth for help. Boy, Elsbeth sure is unorganized. She has a terrible, never-seen assistant, Fantasia, but she is on the case and approaches the federal agent to figure out why he's doing this. He doesn't want to talk business at lunch, but she's persistent and talks him into drawing up an immunity grant before Alicia will talk. Meanwhile, Elsbeth visits Alicia and says that she needs help on a case. She's swamped. Would Alicia please take one of her clients? Alicia does, because she's probably going somewhere with this, and once they get back to the room with the Fed, they sign the agreement. Alicia's safe, but she still has info that will get her client arrested, and she's got to say it. It's the law. But Elsbeth tells her to wait. She can't say anything because she has attorney-client privilege. I know what you're not thinking because it's a complicated scheme. Didn't Alicia just sign away her attorney-client privilege? Yes, for this client, but she has this other client that's a party to this info. Oh, which client? The one that Elsbeth gave her yesterday. This guy is sufficiently steamed and gives up, a minor threat but still guilely handled. Alicia is awed by Elsbeth's technique, and she wants to learn from her, and Elsbeth demurs before changing the subject. A few weeks later, Will Gardner's in trouble, and Alicia advises him to go to Elsbeth. Her office is still a disaster. They are painting and the phone ended up under the tarp somehow. She does the thing where she again visits someone at lunch and reveals that she has released some judges' names to the press to start a political stink in the state attorney's office. This eventually leads to the prosecutor calling Elsbeth's bluff and impaneling a grand jury anyway. It's all pretty boring, honestly, and Elsbeth barely does anything fun besides hyperfixate on the shitty character at the center of this case because he was in a movie once. So it goes with Will plots. He's always just pretty sketchy and hard to root for, especially when most of it is just love triangle stuff. The point is, Will is not indicted because Wendy screwed up by making it about Alicia's affair with Will, and it confused the grand jury. Elsbeth really wasn't needed here, but it at least ingratiates her with the partners, which brings us to... It's Friday morning when Alicia gets a call from Elsbeth. She's in the suburbs and she needs some help because she has been arrested. She was just trying to talk to the defendant in a lawsuit she is pursuing while he was at a college function, and for some reason they arrested her for chasing him into the parking garage. Anyway, she needs Alicia to cover the arbitration for her client, Olympic athlete whose sponsorship reneged on their contract. Alicia agrees and also uses some nepotism to try to get Elsbeth out before the weekend. Peter's running for governor, after all. Things escalate, though, when the athlete is disqualified from her next race because of a trace on her drug test, and Elsbeth is going to miss her bond hearing because the suburb cops won't transfer her without a psych evaluation. So our central cast all drop their weekend plans to help Elsbeth, with Will, Diane, and Kalinda working together to argue the athlete's case before the Olympic board to stall while Alicia tries to get Elsbeth out of jail. This is the best Elsbeth episode of the series, and it also has some good wife classic bits. It's always fun when lawyers have to argue in a non-traditional courtroom, and this one is a real clown show as the three-person panel deliberates in French.
We'll be fine.
Le tribunal d'arbitrage du sport est en session. Je m'appelle Antoine Villapic et je serai le président du comité. Il y aura 3 membres au comité, à moins qu'il y ait une objection. Monsieur Planquette.
Back in jail, Alicia has to instruct Elsbeth how to act like a normal human being so she can pass the psych eval, which she ends up failing because she has a breakthrough about the case in the middle of it. This feels illegal, right? She is being denied due process because of her autism, and it works out because she has friends in high places, but they don't even bring up that she's being discriminated against here. Meanwhile, back at the stadium, they figure out why the athlete failed her drug test. She was pregnant at the time. She is no longer pregnant, and she doesn't want to reveal this information because she's a Christian and her mom will be mad. So they have to figure out another way, and it takes Elsbeth finally being released to win the case by pulling in a surprise witness. The day is saved, and Elsbeth is just so happy that her friends helped her out. It's so cute. Now Eli Gold needs help because he did an election crime, and Elsbeth is more than happy to assist. They head to the DOJ and encounter this room full of weirdos. Everyone at the DOJ is a weirdo, especially this goddamn guy, Josh Peretti, played by known weirdo Kyle MacLachlan, and I do not care for him because he makes Elsbeth very uncomfortable. She comes to him with evidence that DOJ didn't cross all their T's, and therefore the wiretap that shows Eli definitely did a crime isn't admissible. He rips up the evidence and alters the original report because he's a corrupt piece of shit. Then he starts hitting on her. Why does he think she will be receptive to his advances after this? So without an option, Eli agrees to wear a wire to try and implicate Peter because this guy just has a boner for taking out politicians, among other things. To be fair, Peter Florek sucks and he should not be running for governor, but him going down would ruin everyone's life, so they do what they have to do, which is have a wired Eli visit the other DOJ agent and get him to confess that they didn't have the right paperwork, meaning the whole thing gets tossed out. It's a brilliant plan for Elsbeth. She's so clever. But Mr. Peretti is not done being an asshole and starts spreading rumors about Eli Gold to hurt the campaign or stay near Elsbeth or something. He's also going really hard to try to woo her, which he just has no response to because it's weird, right? This is weird. They do some more courtroom fighting and eventually Elsbeth wins. Somehow, it's not important. The point is, Josh asks her to dinner and she says no. Good riddance. Get lost, Mr. Peretti. The firm is being sued for sexually harassing a paralegal and they need an outside counsel. Most of the partners agree that Elsbeth is the right choice, except for David Lee, of course, the old sourpuss, but he comes around when she reveals he's just as heartless as he is. She just wants to win. Turns out it was a series of misunderstandings and a case gets dropped when Kalinda reveals the paralegal and her were sleeping together, because Kalinda do be like that. We see her again at the big lawyer convention in New York, where she gives a speech and is also hate crimed by a street performer. She's very vulnerable for about 10 minutes, and then later that night she's drunk and singing High Hopes with Nathan Lane. She's celebrating because she's going to be starting a 2-woman firm with Crossing Jordan, who everyone in the show was trying to get to join them. I'm happy for her. We get an opening scene from Elsbeth in Season 6, something she doesn't get a lot of, as we see the world from her point of view. It feels very Sherlock and Memory Palace, and it's an interesting presentation of her autism and ADHD, although it feels reductive. The clown in your mind a bit is kind of funny, though. She finds herself across the bench from Alicia in a case, and unfortunately, when Alicia knows her opponent, she goes for the jugular. She disorients Elsbeth by surreptitiously showing her cool flyers. But Elsbeth is determined to not get distracted, striving to mask her bet when who should walk in but Mr. Peretti. She thinks he's there to mess with her, but it's apparently unrelated. He just needs to shut down the case for some law reason. I don't tend to remember the cases in Good Wife, and I can't be bothered to explain. She accuses Mr. Peretti of being a creep when she doesn't hear about a rescheduling because Fantasia is awful at her job. This leads to a flirting scene that is actually kind of cute, and I'm very concerned that there may be chemistry here. Oh, okay, I guess there is in fact some chemistry here. Unfortunately, Josh blows it when she once again shows him some evidence that will get rid of the case, and he proceeds to destroy it. Did last night mean nothing to you, Mr. Peretti? Anyway, she recorded him, so Elsbeth wins the case and sends him back to DC. She won't call. There's only a little bit of Elsbeth in Season 7, as she's hired again to deal with the potential investigation into Peter, again, because this asshole ran for president. Anyway, she starts investigating the case when she hears something that means she has a conflict of interest. She can't do it. So she recommends Michael Tascioni, her ex-husband, with whom she shares custody of their dog, Tommy. I do not like Michael Tascioni. He is strange in an unsettling way. Not strange in a good way, like Elsbeth. And these two have some real weird vibes around each other, as he's still clearly madly in love with her, and she won't fall for his charms again. Anyway, she nopes out of the case and leaves it to Mike, who carries the dog with him everywhere and is pretty bad at his job. I'm going to assume that Mike took her last name and still uses it for some reason. Probably because he's a weird creep. Riddick Boseman is in trouble. Chandler is trying to destroy their law firm because they win too many police brutality cases against the city. He's digging for literally anything to take them down, and he will lie without regret. Just making shit up. Luca heard from Alicia that if you're in trouble, you go to Elsbeth. So they track her down to exam room 5 at the children's dentist office. This place is packed and she's getting a whole room to herself for an assumed low fee? Anyway, of course, she takes the case. She tracks down Kristiva to a diner to talk, and he is not happy to see her, basically threatening her livelihood. She's not afraid of him, though, countering by spending an evening with his wife. They have a great time. He's fuming now. How dare she go through his stuff? He's going to get her disbarred. Unfortunately for him, she records literally all of her conversations at this point, so he can't hurt her without hurting himself. A stalemate. Elsbeth has some suspicions about Maya's dad, who's out on bail from being arrested for financial fraud. She's concerned that Kristiva may have offered a deal to get dirt, so she wants Maya to lie to her dad if he asks her questions about work. She eventually decides to do so, and turns out they were right when Kristiva takes the bait. Unfortunately for her, she records literally all of her conversations at this point, and Kristiva drops in to confiscate her Siri. They now know that the dirt they had was a fib, but they had already impounded the grand jury, so they might as well do this. She advises the law firm on how to act in the grand jury, but so many people are being interviewed that they need to know what people are talking about in there, what Kristiva is fishing for. So Elsbeth countersues him for intentionally targeting the firm, which, yes, he is doing. Then they call all the witnesses who sat before the grand jury to figure out what they were asked about. It's devious, and Kristiva's lawyer calls her out on it right away, but the judge lets the suit go on because it's interesting. They feud for a bit, and eventually they get Maya's dad on the stand to state that he's been offered a sweetheart deal for his testimony, and this leaks and the angry mom calls Kristiva's boss and gets her investigation shut down. Checkmate, Elsbeth. Kristiva drops in once more to smarm at her and claim that this isn't over, but seeing as Matthew Perry has passed, it's pretty definitively over. Elsbeth only gets half an episode this season and won't return until season 6, so it's a small amount of Elsbeth to go on, but she's fun while she's here. Luca's brother is being hunted by the government because he started a site that provides help filling out legal forms for inmates. A worthy cause, but the Fed wants to shut him down because he's making their job harder. Corrupt government agents are Elsbeth's specialty, and she's the best lawyer Luca knows, so she's hired. She's pretty wily in the deposition room, but the whole thing eventually gets shut down when Bozeman hears about it and buys Luca's brother out. Because Adrian sucks and is afraid that the site might make lawyers obsolete. It sucks. Bad argument. Anyway, this gives Elsbeth an opportunity to attend the nearly empty grand opening party and bond with Diane. It is so nice seeing these two be friends, although I will note that Diane has been microdosing this season, so she's a little off at the moment. The good fight trucked along going slowly and sane when the producers decided they wanted to end on a high note and made a final season. When a series knows it's going off the air, they've got to bring back all the favorites, so Elsbeth drops by with a push-nup, where a rich couple wants to establish a financial burden since the woman is pausing her career to raise a baby. It's mostly nonsense rich person bullshit, but she gets to hang out with Richard, and I love Richard. This guy raises like a dozen children with his accidental harem. He's a regular Tenchi Muyo over here, only like queer-coded. He just likes hanging out with women, that's all. Anyway, he underestimates her, so Richard calls in Diane's help, and Diane cannot be more excited.
Oh, is there a problem?
Elsbeth Tascioni?
Is she here?
She just showed up.
She loves Elsbeth. She's so fun to have around. Hard agree, Diane. She's the best. They catch up. Elsbeth's got into glassblowing during the lockdown. She started with sourdough, but then she gained 20 pounds. She has paperweights for everyone. They look awful. They see no reason not to just make a deal, and they are about to wrap this up when Paul Scheer bursts in. He's here to represent the unborn baby. It's some business about a generation-skipping trust. Again, rich people bullshit. But they end up suing the fetus and keep referring to it as a baby because the judge they are arguing to is a pro-life weirdo. They win, whatever, and Elsbeth is off once more. She's got somewhere else to be. Okay, thanks for your patience. It's time to actually talk about the show now. The television show Elsbeth, now showing on Paramount Plus, is the further adventures of Elsbeth in New York, where she is appointed as the lawyer overseeing the consent decree on the NYPD, although that's really a front for her to snoop for a federal agent. She fails to do both jobs for most of the series, as she is instead infinitely distracted and keeps noticing weird details at the crime scene she visits, and takes it upon herself to look around and ask questions. Yes, that's right. She's now an amateur detective, a regular Jessica Fletcher, given way too much leeway by the police around her because, hey, she keeps solving these murders. Might as well see what she's thinking. I'm not going to spoil much of the series because I think that if you like mystery shows, especially The Old Lieutenant himself, you should definitely watch this. It's great, it's funny, it's got a lot of heart. Our main three characters are compelling, despite two of them being cops. Our murderers are well cast, written, and acted. We got a lot of good side characters, some really good bits, and the finale was really cool. 5 more seasons, please. We'll talk about the finale shortly, but first we need to talk about Columbo again. So what makes Columbo, Columbo? There are a number of traits that make him specifically him, all of which match well with the inverted detective story format. He's a great archetype, and if you're looking to make a strong Columbo pastiche, I would say there are maybe exactly 10 traits that any good star detective should have to really feel like you're referencing this goober. This is basic detective stuff. A detective that doesn't find clues isn't a good detective. Columbo just sees what others can't and is able to piece together massive deductions from very little. It's believable to us because we already know all the details, we saw the murder, and we can make the logical leaps the detective does. It makes you feel smart even though it already gave you the answer. But typically Columbo just seems to know everything somehow. Columbo cannot be stopped once he's identified his suspect. No amount of passive-aggressive needling or outright threats will prevent the detective from proving the killer did it, and they will show up when the suspect least suspects, just to ask a few more questions. Is it unethical? Probably, but we already know the suspect is a bad person, or at least desperate, and it doesn't feel that bad. The truth has got to come out, and the detective won't give up until they prove it. There's a reason Columbo wears the same outfit for 30 years. It's because he's a cartoon character. The detective is almost always an outsider in their work. They're the neutral arbitrator trying to figure out if something's going on, and having a distinct, unusual look reinforces this. For Columbo, his big trench coat, messy hair, and disheveled suit is all there to make him look poor, even though he's got to be at least upper middle class. To divide him from the people he's interacting with, the corrupt upper crust of Los Angeles. Also, it makes him fun to look at. Look at this guy. Columbo is always extremely polite. He is very sorry to bother you. He just has to check some things. The boys upstairs just want all these details. You understand. No matter how frustrated the killer gets with him, he keeps his composure, very apologetic and demure. It really makes him endearing to the viewer because while it's definitely an act, he just seems like such a friendly guy, you know? You'd spend time with him, get a bowl of chili and absolutely get rocked at pool. You just gotta like him a little. Columbo is always poking around, getting distracted by things, asking a lot of weird questions, just a real oddball, you know? I guess it's just part of his whole thing, but it is hard to have a conversation with him. He is definitely going to tell you something about his wife. He's such a wife guy. Speaking of wives, it's important that we never see Mrs. Columbo, except that one time. I talked about it earlier, go watch it. We only ever see Columbo when he's working. When he's off the clock, that's his time. He's just hanging out with his wife and holding her hand while they read books together. I'm sure it's fucking adorable. But it's not important what he's doing. It's the acknowledgement that he's a full person. He has a wife and everything. He's not some unfeeling crime-solving robot like some detectives. It humanizes him. The killer is always wealthy, mainly because it's easier for the wealthy to get away with murder, and they need a strong opponent to prevent that. Their surrendered capitalism has twisted them all morally, and they need to be removed from their privilege for their crimes. Columbo is just a working-class ace detective, and while he never mocks his suspects, he might even like them a little, he's not going to let their wealth interfere with his justice. I mentioned that Columbo is constantly asking a lot of questions, right? Him being difficult to talk to is part of his shtick. It's how he uncenters the suspect to get information out of them, get them to slip up. He's not doing it on purpose, really. He just takes advantage of his natural bumbling sometimes to maybe get a look at a clue. Columbo loves a trick. He loves himself a magic show. He battled 2 magicians. He spent 5 minutes explaining a magic trick to his friend. He's gaga for this shit. He also likes to use some trickery to crack the case, provide some misleading information, arrest the wrong person. He's pretty clever. Absolutely unethical, but it's a TV show. Nobody really died or went to jail. It's fine. Yes, it's propaganda, but I know that. I'm thinking critically here. Look, I get it. Columbo can be pretty boring and a lot to handle, but sometimes that stuff is charming, okay? People can like different things, I understand, but if you bounce off the whole Columbo thing, I get it. I'll move on someday. Nothing is forever. But Columbo, y'all, what a character. I probably don't need to explain that Elsbeth has all these things. She notices every little detail and jumps to the right conclusion. She is always ambushing the killer at odd places. Her wardrobe has a lot of variety, but she tends to favor loud mishmash colors, a bit hodgepodge, and she's always carrying at least 3 handbags. There are so many things she needs to tote around. She is always happy, excited to see whoever she's talking to, will compliment your outfit randomly, and overshares details about her life and feelings. Everyone knows how odd she is because, yes, she is clearly neurodivergent. All the promo material notes that she has autism, but we don't have to make her feel weird about it. They should just be less mean, is all I'm saying. She's not married, she is happily single, but she does have a son, Teddy, who we never see. He's in DC, but she's a proud mama. All the killers featured in the show have way too much money, all stars in their respective fields and motivated by some petty justifications. It is very difficult to keep up with Elsbeth, and mystery murderers find themselves blundering around her. She loves some subterfuge. It's okay to lie if it's in the pursuit of the truth, and why not engage the killer in a dance battle? And she is a bit much, an acquired taste, but I hope I've given you just enough to give it a try. Of course this show has all those things. They have not been shy about this being a Columbo pastiche. What should be clear to you, while I was going down that list, is she has always been a Columbo pastiche. She had all of those traits in the original series of Good Wife. Carrie Preston said that when she was offered the part, it was literally pitched to her as a female Columbo. No wonder this character is my favorite character on Good Wife. She's the bumbling, agreeable detective, but as a lawyer. I'm glad that she finally gets a chance to do the job that she was clearly meant to do. Bring on season 2. I can't wait.
Just one more thing.
I want to discuss the finale briefly. I'll be broad, but if you want to watch it blind, you can shut the video off. Like and subscribe, please. Have fun. It's a great show. Okay, cool. Just us SA heads here. Spoilers for the last episode of Elsbeth, as if that matters because the very concepts of the show means you already know who did it. As my watch of Elsbeth was progressing, I knew in my heart that the final episode was going to be a formula twist. It was the obvious play, a chance to give us another returning character, or maybe Elsbeth back in the courtroom, and I was dreading it a little, because Good Wife lore is unreasonably thick, and I can't remember who all these damn lawyers are. I don't want to see Cariagos. But the episode started promisingly. We're outside a fashion event, and we have a number of shady characters walking around. Suddenly, a hand pops out of a curtain and shoots a photographer in the back. Then we cut away to see multiple people entering from backstage. That wasn't clear at all. Yep, formula break. We're getting a whodunit this time. And then Elsbeth shows up and starts poking around, but she's feeling a bit off. Her short-term job as an encamped lawyer is coming to an end, and she's not sure how to feel. She's having a lot of emotions about it. The investigation continues, and Elsbeth doesn't have a lead. And I realize, oh, Elsbeth knows what we know, because we didn't see the murder. She doesn't know who she should investigate. This is good, actually. And it is good. We finally get something we've never seen before. Elsbeth being sad. She doesn't want to leave, but she can't ask to stay. And it's overwhelming her a little. She's having a bit of a breakdown, and her friends pull it through for her. God, the friendship in this episode is so good. I love this platonic trio, and maybe also this detective lady. They only worked together like twice before. I don't know if she's part of it yet. It's like when they add a member to the friend group in a DCOM sequel. I guess we're seeing more of her later. Or not. Good Wife loves having lots and lots of recurring characters. Maybe she's just one of those. Anyway, the Wiz takes on Elsbeth as his muse and does a fashion show based on her, while she's trying to find a good suspect and keeps finding suspicious activity from everyone involved. So much so that the suspects start accusing each other. It's kind of hilarious. Elsbeth finally gets her groove back during her catwalk, and figures out what happened and finds her proof immediately. She's back, and she's been invited to stay after all. Hooray! She's going to have a functional office for once. I'm so excited for her. So, Elsbeth, won't you? I encourage you once more to check it out. This is not a paid advertisement, I just like this show. Not that I wouldn't take money, please find my Patreon link below. I'd just disclose it properly because I don't want to be sued. Seems like it sucks. Anyway, I think it's time to poke the bear and talk about something from Disney, since I haven't talked about anti-coms yet, and I've got a weird meta mess with the Teen Beach Movie movies. Find out why this hip song is secretly terrifying or whatever, next time.
Fizzle, 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 whizzle, whizzle, whizzle.